The change is already happening, gang. We are in the middle of a global shift. Now, I break it all down in my most important book yet, America Awaken. Go to americaawaken.us and get early access now.
But when I look at the people who are out there doing the violence, that's not the people that we see during the day who are legitimately out there exercising their First Amendment rights and to be able to express their feelings about the immigration enforcement issue. These are people who are all hooded up. They've got a hoodie on. They've got face masks on. They're people who do this all the time, get away with whatever they can, go out there, from one civil unrest situation to another, using the same or similar tactics frequently, and they are connected. Some would call them anarchists or by any other variety of names.
Yeah, or in Trump's words, they are, quote, paid insurrectionists. This is the latest twist in the unfolding riot saga in L.A. It's becoming increasingly clear that this was all staged, that these rioters were bought and paid for, and now the Trump administration looks like they're ready to crack down on the real enemies of democracy. Now, first, we should note that we've got the Washington Post flipping out as of today. The far-left lunatics disguised as journalists are lamenting that Trump's mass deportation efforts are working big time. They're reporting that over 1 million foreign-born workers, i.e. illegals, have exited the workforce since March, over 1 million. And the left-wing activists disguised as journalists over at the Washington Post are flipping out over it because they never imagined in their worst nightmares that over 1 million illegals would self-deport. That's what this piece is highlighting here. They never imagined that over 1 million illegals would self-deport in a matter of just a couple of months. But that is exactly what's happening here. Now, the New York Post is focusing on at least two organizations with significant political and international affiliations playing leading roles behind these riots. One is a taxpayer-funded group with ties to the Democratic Party, so you're funding these riots. Surprise, surprise. And the other is linked to the Chinese Communist Party. So first, you've got a group called the Coalition for Humane Immigrant Rights. They always have these virtue signaling titles to them. It's a prominent LA-based immigration advocacy organization. But what makes this organization so interesting is that they received, according to the Post, get this, $34 million in government grants. $34 million, mostly from California. This is in the fiscal year ending June 2023. Now, interestingly, that was a substantial increase from the $12 million that they got the previous year. The coalition also obtained $500,000 in federal grants, our tax money, from the Department of Homeland Security for, quote, citizenship education and training. This between October 2021 and September of 2024. Now, of course, Homeland Security has since cut all ties with the coalition since Trump took over. But they staged a press conference to protest ICE's arrest of undocumented migrants, right? Illegal migrants, of course, including those with serious criminal convictions, just before this unrest broke out. So many are pointing the finger at this coalition as one of the major funders of this riot. The second organization that the Post article is calling out is the Party for Socialism and Liberation, otherwise known as the PSL. They're described as a Marxist group with a history of organizing aggressive protests, including anti-Israel demonstrations at Columbia University. And this is the group that's linked to the CCP through funding from socialist billionaire Neville Singham and his wife Jody Evans, who's the founder of the radical far-left protest movement Code Pink. But what's so interesting here is that our good friend Data Republican, in her research, she found that Singham and Soros tend to team up whenever they try to destroy and suppress populist movements around the world. So she hasn't found a smoking gun yet, but there may be some ties with Soros here as well. But those are the two main organizations, the PSL and the Coalition for Humane Immigrant Rights, that the New York Post has identified as those most likely behind these riots, which of course begs the question, why on earth are they doing this? Why are these Marxist socialist organizations fanning the flames of so much societal unrest? I mean, obviously the answer to that doesn't come easily when most of our so-called journalism today is just activism with a headline, right? We all know that they routinely bury the truth under layers of spin, opinions, and algorithmic manipulation. So I've got to say, that's why I use Ground News. It cuts through the propaganda and shows what's really happening. Ground News pulls together stories from over 50,000 news sources all around the world. But what makes it stand out is that it doesn't just give you the headlines, it shows you the political bias and ownership behind each outlet reporting. So you're not just reading the news, you're actually understanding it. That's why more than 1 million people have downloaded the Ground News app. The Nobel Peace Center even called it, quote, an excellent way to stay informed, avoid echo chambers, and expand your worldview. Check it out for yourself at ground.news/Steve. Now, my favorite feature is the blind spot feed because it highlights stories that are heavily reported by one side of the political spectrum, but virtually ignored by the other. It's one of the best ways to uncover bias in real time. So, for example, here's a story being totally ignored on the left. New records show the FBI circulated an anti-Catholic memo to over 1,000 employees labeling certain Catholic communities as potential domestic terrorism threats. Now, internal emails show that the memo got positive feedback from other FBI offices with no recorded objections. It's a disturbing look at how religious groups were being viewed by federal agencies under former President Biden. Now, here's one that the right isn't talking about. Quote, Trump has been privately criticizing Supreme Court justices he nominated, especially Amy Coney Barrett, for not reliably backing his agenda. It's more than just personal frustration. It signals growing tension inside the conservative movement over loyalty and the Supreme Court. With every story, Ground News shows you exactly who's covering it, where those outlets fall politically, how reliable the reporting has been, and even who owns them. It's transparency you're just not going to get anywhere else. So right now, you can actually get 40% off the Vantage plan. It's the premium version that I use myself. Just head on over to ground.news/Steve, click the link in the description or scan the QR code. That's ground.news/Steve. I'm sure many of you heard of or are familiar with something called the Cloward-Piven strategy. If not, this is going to blow your mind. It goes back to this article published back in 1966 in the ultra-leftist Marxist publication called The Nation. They're still around, they're still publishing, and there's still a bunch of socialist shills. And the article was entitled, The Weight of the Poor, a Strategy to End Poverty. Now, again, this was published back in 66. It was written by two professors, Richard Cloward and Francis Fox Piven, both from Columbia University, which, as many of you know, was the queen bee's nest for cultural Marxism in the nation. During World War II, members of the cultural Marxist school known as the Frankfurt School left Europe and settled in American academia, and their home base was Columbia University. So 2 decades later, in 66, we got two Columbia professors advocating for our federal leaders to basically force a crisis in the welfare system in order to compel the federal government to enact a new program for direct income distribution. And so the strategy boiled down to intentionally provoking a series of political crises, largely caused by straining the capacity of local governments to be able to effectively govern, which is, of course, exactly what we've been seeing in LA and what we saw in Minneapolis and Seattle and Portland in 2020. So the Cloward-Piven plan involved getting state and local governments to basically abdicate their law enforcement responsibilities so as to deliberately overwhelm the social system with a series of governing crises. And these professors believed that that would ultimately compel national Democratic leaders to respond with a federal solution that would guarantee, annual income, that would override local conflicts and provide a permanent socialist resolution to poverty. And this is key. The plan explicitly states that the news media would need to play a critical role in the information warfare needed to indoctrinate the public and support their cultural Marxist vision. Now, you can see why the legacy media today is so opposed to the Trump administration using troops to crack down on this deliberate attempt at fomenting social chaos. That is not the solution that the media is allowed to advocate. They need to be advocating socialist solutions. We need more cultural Marxism in our institutions. We need the very restorative justice that Soros-backed DAs have been implementing in many of our nation's cities. That is precisely what the legacy media is pushing as we speak. I mean, take a look at this garbage from MSNBC.
What are you expecting, and what obligation do leaders in California and elsewhere have to set the right tone, to speak with clarity in this moment about really what's at stake and at risk here?
I think we heard Mayor Bass trying to do some of this, right? Which is to say, we have a long tradition of peaceful protest in this country, and we need to protect peaceful protest, and that it has a place, and that law enforcement will also have to protect people and property. That's appropriate. But I think it also has to be clear that when you violate people's rights, and then when you don't allow for civil disobedience, that what you will get is exactly these images.
That's right. You enforce the law. You enforce immigration law. This is what you get. These riots are precisely what you get because enforcing the law involves violating people's rights. For Democrats and for the legacy media, it is illegal to enforce the law, to enforce the law you don't like. So if it's illegal to enforce the law, then what's the necessary entailment of that implication? It's therefore perfectly legal to break the law. If it's illegal to enforce the law, then it is legal to break those laws. That's literally the Cloward-Piven strategy in a nutshell. It's strategic chaos in order to basically bring about a communist revolution. Chaos breeds cultural Marxism. The Democrat Party is the enemy of this nation. That's what they have become. And they are being funded by enemies of this nation. And let's all pray that President Trump and the MAGA movement will bring a decisive end to this threat once and for all.